momentarily.
You ready?
I'm just waiting for a text.
Okay.
We're live.
Hmm?
We're live.
We're live. Good morning. My name is Don Popple, and I'm the chairman of the Committee of Adjustment. And the meeting for December the 8th will now come to order. Welcome to this meeting. We do have 6 cases to deal with today. We also have some unfinished business from previous things, which we're going to deal with first. But a notice to everyone in attendance, this meeting will be live streamed on YouTube and recorded. And note the recording will be linked to the municipal website following the meeting. Our committee today consists of Mr. David Bishop, Mr. Gerald Walker, and Mr. John Smith, who is councillor for Ward 4 in Halliburton. This is a public hearing to consider six applications for a minor variance to the municipality zoning bylaw. It is the committee's responsibility to consider all the information received to date regarding the requested variances and to hear and consider any comments or questions provided by these applications. Any variances granted by the committee must meet 4 tests, which are very clearly defined in the Planning Act. And the requested variances must be: number 1, minor in nature; number 2, desirable for the proper development of the land; number 3, comply with the general intent of the official plan; number 4, comply with the general intent of the zoning bylaw. Please note, if anyone wishes to be notified of the decision, please make a request in writing to the municipality. Are there any members of the committee who do have a conflict of interest with any of these cases today? Indicate by holding your hand, and there would appear that there are no conflicts of interest. Any oral or written submissions received in advance of the meeting will be verbally read aloud at the time the application is being considered. Information regarding live streaming of the meeting is available on the Municipality of Detached our website. All persons who have pre-registered will have an opportunity to present or ask questions about the proposals, and please direct all questions and comments to the chair. Each registered person will have up to 5 minutes to provide comments or questions. Once finished speaking, the host will mute your microphone. The 5-minute rule is really going to have to apply with this many applicants, or we'll be here till 6 o'clock tonight. We have, before we get to deal with the first application, we do have some business to finish that has to do with prior meetings. I need a mover and a seconder for the minutes to be adopted for the Committee of Adjustment October 13, 2021 as circulated. Someone move that. Mr. Walker. And seconded by John Smith. All in favor? We're carried. I need a mover and a seconder for the resolved the minutes from the meeting of October 28, 2021, the site inspection be adopted as read. Someone move that. David Bishop. And a seconder, Gerald Walker. All in favor? It's carried. I don't know what we'd ever do with that paper, but I need a mover and a seconder for this motion. It's be resolved that the following members of council are appointed to sit as members of the Committee of Adjustment for the 2022 calendar year, effective January 3rd, 2022. John Smith, Wal McKechnie, Nancy Wood Roberts, and Tammy Donaldson. Need a mover and a seconder. David Bishop. And a seconder is Gerald Walker. All in favor? Carried. Well, should be interesting. We have to appoint a chairman for the Committee of Adjustment meetings beginning January 2022. So we're open for nominations. Mr. Bishop?
I would nominate Mr. Popple as our continuing chair for the following season.
And is there a seconder? We got two seconders. John
I'll
Smith.
second that and move that nominations be closed.
That sounds great.
Gary,
So it's, the motion is be resolved that Mr. Popple will be appointed to chair the Committee of Adjustment meetings for the term of the committee beginning January 2022. That's carried. Please indicate your support. Thank you. Okay, we'll get rid of this paper here.
You have one more.
We got one more? Oh, yeah, okay. We need a mover and a seconder. Be resolved, Jeff Isles be appointed as the secretary treasurer and that Danielle Hicks be appointed as the deputy secretary treasurer for the Dysart Committee of Adjustment for the term beginning January 2022. John Smith, second by Jerry Walker. All in favor? Carried. Well, you can have these.
Just toss them.
You get rid of those. And we will carry on with the first application for today's meeting is Mr. Connolly from Halliburton Lake. Is he live?
Jeff has a question.
Jeff has a question?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Before we proceed, can you just ask other committee members if they have any pecuniary interests in any of these files?
I didn't hear what he said.
He wants you to make sure that no one has any pecuniary interest.
you did that.
We already did that.
Did I miss that? I apologize.
Yeah. The answer to the question was there were no pecuniary interests. I don't
Thank
know
you.
if
Noted in
anybody's
my
a-
minutes.
I don't know if anybody's in a pecuniary situation. Anyway, yeah, we did deal with that. So, Mr. Connolly, are you there? Nice to see
Yep.
you. And I believe that perhaps we can you just bring us up to date on where we stand with you? And then I think that some of the conditions have already been dealt with, and we'll move on from there.
Okay. Yeah, first, thanks for everybody to come up and visit us there in late October. Appreciated the visit. And I guess changes from the original minor variance that we requested. We've reduced the building size from 28 by 48 to 28 by 40. So the lot coverage is now just 16%. So the variance we would ask for is 16% versus the 15 allowed. We've moved the building on the south side where we required a variance to that road allowance. We've moved it to the required 7.5 meters. So the only, I guess the only existing requirement is we do still request the 16 feet from Bowen versus the 24.5 feet, I think it is for that.
Right.
And other conditions, we've had the container moved. We had our woodshed moved to actually over to where the container was. We sent pictures of all of that. Kind of an entertaining picture of Mitch Stephen carrying the thing over with his excavator. So, but that worked out okay. And we cleaned up any things that were on the road allowance logs. It's all nicely cleaned up now, and I think the pictures we sent were fairly good to illustrate that. So,
Well, we certainly appreciate your cooperation with this, and I think we can deal with the there's 4 variances required with what we're going to deal with. And I think we'll deal with them as right off the bat. Be it resolved, the committee's decision with respect to file 13 MV 2021-026 be recorded as follows. I will add that for the people who are tuned in, maybe not aware of this, we did visit this township site last month, so the total committee was there. So a variance to the provision of section 5.2 permit a dwelling to have a minimum exterior side lot setback of 16 feet or 4.8 meters as opposed to the permitted minimum of 7.5 meters or 24.6 feet is granted. Will you please indicate your support for that? Mr. Smith?
Yeah, are you granting A, but we're going to decline the others? Is that what you're doing? Because
These are the ones that these are the variances required for him. Correct? Yeah,
Correct.
just a
So,
minute, Danielle.
so A would be for the dwelling. B would be for the exterior side to the garage, which is no longer needed.
okay, I just want to make sure we're rejecting a couple of these, right?
Yes.
Well, I think we're not, yeah. These are the ones that we're going to allow. Is my understanding, correct?
The ones in front of you that B, they no longer need.
Well,
Yeah, we're going to
the
decline
second
B.
variance is section 5.2 to permit accessory building to have a minimum exterior side lot setback of 14 or 4.8 meters or 16 feet as opposed to permitted minimum of 7.5 or 24.6.
They do no longer need that.
That's
It's
going to be
not
rejected.
required. So that will be denied. Okay, carry on. You with me there, John?
Yeah, I agree with
I had
that.
it incorrect.
And C would be 16% as opposed to 17%.
C is 16%. Yeah. Variance provision of section 5.2 to permit a lot in the waterfront residential type 4L WR 4L zone to have a maximum lot coverage of 16% as opposed to required maximum of 15 is granted. Please indicate your support. Carried. And a variance to permit provision of section 5.2 to permit an accessory building to have a minimum rear lot line setback of 4.8 meters, 16 feet, as opposed to the permitted minimum of 7.5 or 24.6 is granted. Please indicate your support. Carried. So Peter, sounds to me like you're good to go. And we would like to add that you've got a nice spot there and it's probably going to be better with all this, and appreciate your support in having us out there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Gail. Gail, thanks you also.
You bet. Number 2 on the list is another returning fire Cowan and McKinley. Is Murray McKinley, is he?
I'm just promoting Jeremy now.
Okay. This is another returning file. Ready to go?
Yep.
So where do we want to start with this? These variances that we're dealing with here are after the site visit, right?
It was after he submitted the new site plan.
Yeah.
Yep.
So are there any, there only is one letter, and it's a letter of support from one neighbor, Mr. Selby, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And I didn't ask on Peter Connolly's, but I don't think there was any.
There's no comments.
Okay. So does anybody have any questions to this gentleman before we carry on here? Jerry Walker?
Maybe, could we ask Jeff if you would maybe explain a little clearer what the request is? I know at the last meeting, I know we talked about asking him to move the building back, and you had mentioned there is other setbacks that we have to deal with. So would you mind just maybe re-explaining the new application and how it relates to what he's asking?
Can you do that, Danielle?
I can.
Yeah,
Or
Danielle can do
Danielle,
that.
sorry, whoever.
That's okay. So Mr. Cowan submitted a new site plan showing that the building was going to be farther away from the side lot line, from 6 feet to 10 feet, and closer to the rear lot line. He was going to be 18 feet opposed to the 7.5 meters, which is 24 feet and change that was needed. So there was 3 additional variances added to the request, but they're all in relation to the exterior, or sorry, to the rear lot line. Just that's the way the bylaw is written.
So I guess a question, the building is going to be the same size as previously designed and applied for. So the difference now is the building is going to go to the rear corner of the lot, which was suggested. And I do see on the picture there, there's the little shed in the corner. Is that to be removed?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the clarification.
With that shed removal, I will add that it decreases the lot coverage to 15.9%.
15,
15.9.
15.9. Okay.
That'll be the motion that the chair is going to read, right? Will reflect 15.9 as opposed to the original request of 17.5, right?
Yes.
Correct. Correct. Any other communication we wish to have on this with respect to this? Mr. Bishop?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, through you, I'd like to ask the question as to, the gentleman has said that this setback that he's offering in regard to the sideline is the only spot that this building can be located. I'm looking at the flyover part of the application material, looking right straight down on the ground. And it would appear to me that the building could still meet the sideline setback rather than the 10 feet that he set forth, but the actual requirements of the bylaw. I'm not that concerned in regard to the rear lot line because it's not going to affect, because of the location of the neighboring property, it doesn't affect that area of land very much at all. But the interior sideline setback looks to me like it could move and meet the sideline setback. Is there a reason why it can't?
Yes, sir.
Well, it's just, we're just trying to really make it work with the space. I mean, is there a reason it can't? It's just that when you're going to cut off, as like the access into the cottage would be curved back, and we're really just trying to follow every recommendation and still kind of keep some kind of access to when you come through the property. I think we're gonna be down to about 15 feet through the turning from that turn where the front of the garage will be. So if we came another 5 foot forward, we'd probably have, out of that 32 foot asphalt big space we have, we'd be down to, I think, 8 or 9 feet, which starts to be, you can just barely get a car through. That was our only concern.
But, Mr. Chair, if I may express there.
Certainly.
So you're indicating here, we can't see the actual process of the driveway, but from my view of it, you could actually daylight that corner a little bit and it would not cut you off at all in terms of accessing the rest of your apron. So that's just something that could be done and taken care of at the time of your construction. So I really don't see the physical impediment to actually meeting the bylaw.
Yeah, we were just trying to follow as much recommendations as you guys were giving us as possible, and just trying to make it work for everybody as much as possible.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that this was part of our discussion at the time of the initial application was,
I think from what I remember, I was kind of guided to go with a 10-foot and 10-foot setback in the corner lot. And I looked at it, and we would have had to take out the trees. So I knew that the 10-foot setback wouldn't even be an option for what I want to do with it, because I was pushing back. I mean, 18, we might even have to go to about 20 just to preserve the trees, to be honest, from the back lot line. Because I don't want to lose the trees or vegetation there. So that I'm pretty flexible with it. Just at the back, the problem is where you come in the driveway, we probably would have to alter that if we had the drive, if the garage came further forward. It would start, it's just starting to get further in towards the center of the property. And that's all
Mr. Bishop?
so are you suggesting that you might not need this rear line setback?
Well, I'm going to ask for the 18 feet, but when we go to build, if the builder says we're too close to the trees, the tree line looks to me like we're about 14 feet. I just want to make sure we preserve the integrity of the trees as much as possible. And I think we are 18 is where I was kind of estimating, but I'm not the builder. So I won't go closer than 18, but if the builder says, you know what, this is too close to the trees, I'm happy to shift back further away from the lot line. It's the rear one, to me, that's more particularly difficult, because we can kind of shift the other way. It's just when you just don't want to, you want to still have access to the house is my concern. So to me, that's more of a priority than the back lot line. I do want to request that we get the 18 feet, because it's helpful if it does work with the trees. But if we had to go 25, I would accept that. It's just at the back, to me, I would accept 25 a lot simpler than I would the 15 foot at the back, because it makes it really difficult accessing the property. Yes.
Mr. Walker?
I seem to recollect that we did, it was probably my suggestion that we asked Mr. Cowan to look at using the word tuck it in the back corner, just so it would make it more useful for the use of the property. And I think part of that discussion was 10 feet would allow people to get back in there if he had to do work on the siding and the building and not impede on the neighbor's property. So I think that was part of the suggestion, was 10 feet. So I'll take responsibility for that.
Thank you.
Okay.
As
Mr. Smith?
Yeah,
Mr.
thank you.
Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in support of the sentiment that David's expressed there, as I look at the diagram, and I can only assume, Mr. Cowan, that your diagram is reasonably accurate. The driveway, the asphalt driveway that is noted as being 30 feet wide, with the garage located in the new location, you are still preserving more than half of the width of the 30-foot driveway. And so if it was moved the 4.8 feet that would be required, you'd still have, again, there's no specific scale on here, but it would appear you still have more than 10 feet of driveway width left there. And, again, you're going to have all kinds of contractors and so forth on site. As Mr. Bishop mentioned, if you had to create a bit of a diagonal there as opposed to a square corner of your asphalt, you could meet the side lot clearance without a problem.
I think you'd probably have to take more trees out. That corner is treed. There's trees all along that driveway. And I really was trying to, we're taking out over 400 square feet of asphalt. I'm trying to follow the recommendations of the committee as much as possible. But we really just, and I understand you're saying, is there a physical impediment? And obviously, we really just didn't, we're trying to get it away from the middle of the driveway. That's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to make it so that the property works where you access it. And so it's desirable for everybody, not just us, And I think I'm really happy with this. And I really do think it, with the recommendation, I feel like I'm happy with the solution. I'm just hoping that the committee is.
Well,
And I would say as one committee member that it is good to see that you've made some progress here in terms of reflecting the feedback that was provided to you last time. There is some good improvement here. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the lot coverage is 15.9, is that correct?
Correct, without the shed.
Right. So as opposed to the 17.5.
Correct.
Any other questions with respect to the application? Danielle?
So would you like me to read out the conditions for the application now?
Absolutely.
So the only comment we received on the application was in support for the adjacent neighbor Raymond Selby. The conditions for this variance are that the variance applies only to the private garage, as generally shown in the site plan. The tree line preservation bylaw applies. During construction, make sure that there's proper sediment fencing. Prior to the issuance of the building permit, the applicant must supply proof that the shed has been removed. The gross floor area of the private cabin shall not exceed the 45 square meters. The applicant shall obtain a building permit for the proposed garage. The applicant shall contact the building department for a septic review. Prior to the pouring of footings, the applicant must supply confirmation from an interior land surveyor that the proposed garage complies with the interior and rear lot line setbacks as shown on the property sketch and or granted today. The proposed garage is to have no decks, openings, so windows or doors, exterior lights or stairs on the walls adjacent to the interior side lot line and a rear side lot line abutting the neighbor. The existing vegetation to the adjacent interior side lot line and rear is to remain intact.
We're good to go?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
8.
There's 8 variances, right, required?
Yes. Done. I will note that E, if he's removing the shed, is no longer required.
On which one?
E. Oh, sorry, not E.
Decrease for the
C.
private cabin have a minimum interior lot line setback?
My apologies, C.
Hmm?
C.
C?
Yeah.
Accessory structure have a minimum interior line setback. So is he
He proposes to
removed that?
remove that shed, yeah.
he's prepared to remove it?
Yeah.
So we don't have to deal with it, or we just deny it?
It's up to the committee. It's no longer needed.
No longer needed. So we'll just delete it.
So because it was circulated, it has to either be granted, deferred, or declined.
Okay, so we're going to deny it then. C. Okay. Okay, so A part is an increased provision of section 5.2 to permit a lot in the waterfront residential type 4 WR4 zone to have a maximum lot coverage of 15.9% as opposed to required maximum of 15% is granted. Please indicate your support. Carried. Increase the provision of section 5.2 to permit a lot in the waterfront residential type 4 WR4 zone to have a maximum shoreline lot coverage of 15.9% as opposed to required maximum of 15% is granted.
Let's see. More.
Carried. C, a decreased provision of section 5.2 to permit accessory structure to have a minimum interior lot line setback of 0.91 meters or 3 feet as opposed to minimum of 1 meter of 3.3 is denied. Apparently he was going to remove it, so
That's the shed.
that's carried. Decreased provision of section 3.1 to permit a private cabin to have a minimum interior side lot line setback of 1.8 meters or 6 feet as opposed to permitted 4.5 or 14.8 feet is granted. Carried.
I think there was a question.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I did not vote in favor of that, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
And could you repeat the
Yeah.
distances on that one, Mr. Chair? I don't think they were correct.
So it was originally circulated at 6 feet, but he is now asking for 10, which is 3 meters instead of 1.8.
Hit me again with that.
So instead of the 1.8 meters,
Yeah,
he's asked for 3 meters now.
he's asked for what?
3 meters.
3 meters.
Yeah.
As opposed to the required 4.5 meters. Is that correct?
Correct. So 3 meters instead of the 4.5.
Okay, we get this back. The D part is a decrease provision of section 3.1 to permit a private cabin to have a minimum interior side lot line setback of 3 meters or 6 feet as opposed to the permitted 4.5 or 14.8 feet. Is granted. 1. Please indicate your support, or the other, are you people denying it then? Got 2 no votes? John?
Yeah, I would be prepared to, compromise there at say, 12 feet. So instead of 3.0 meters, and if he's versus 4.5, make it 3.75 meters.
Mr. Bishop?
I would go along with that, Mr. Chair.
I'll go with that.
So they'll go with that. So that means that we're, hit me again, John, with that, would you?
Well, instead, you've read it out at 3.0 meters. I said 3.75 meters as opposed to the 4.5 meters that's permitted.
3.75.
And that will be the same for the next variance. Would be the same distance.
So it's exactly the same thing though.
It's 2 different parts of the bylaw.
Okay, so we're going to start over here on D. Decrease provision of section 3.1 to permit a private cabin to have a minimum interior side lot line setback of 3.75 meters as opposed to permitted 4.5 meters. Is granted. Carried. We're going to do that one again. So E is a decreased provision of section 3.1 to permit a 2-story accessory building to have a minimum interior side lot line setback of 3.75 meters as opposed to the required 4.5 meters. Granted? Okay. 3.75. And a decreased provision of section 5.2 to permit a 2-story accessory building to have a rear lot line setback of 5.4 meters or 18 feet as opposed to permitted 7.5 meters or 24.6 feet. Is granted. That's carried. And a decreased provision of section 3.1 to permit a private cabin to have a rear lot line setback of 5.4 meters or 18 feet as opposed to permitted 7.5 or 24.6. Is granted. I think we set a new record here. And a decrease to provision of section 3.1 to permit a 2-story accessory building to have a rear lot line setback of 5.4 meters or 18 feet as opposed to permitted 7.5 and 24.6. Is granted. Mr. Cowan, sounds like you're good to go. Thank you for your assistance and cooperation in this respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we're just looking at about 12 feet or 13 feet from the back as a compromise instead of the 15.
From the side.
Yep, this side.
I will send you an email with the updated decision.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, who are we have here now?
I'll be bringing in Carrie McWhinney.
Cowan and McKinley.
We just did Cowan and McQuinley.
Yeah, Carrie McKinley.
McWhinney.
This particular application is seeking a variance to section 5.2 to permit a 1-story accessory building to have a maximum height of 26 feet as opposed to the permitted 5.5 meters or 18 feet. So I'm sure there's going to be some discussion with respect to this. So are you live, Carrie?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Corey, is it?
Carrie.
Carrie? Yeah. You want to start off the discussion with respect to this application? Tell us what you haven't, we know what you have in mind. We're willing to discuss it with you.
Yes, so I don't have a lot to add to the staff report and recommendation, Mr. Chair. Just a very quick background on this. I when I decided to build a garage last spring, I liked the Halliburton Ecolog stuff. And when I called them to see if I could get a kit, they told me that it was a 2-year backlog. So the good news is there's a local business that's busy, but they happen to have the fellow there, Peter, told me that they had a kit that was available right away because someone had backed out on the deal. So I bought that kit. And the kit is, while it's a single story garage I want to build, the height of the kit is almost 26 feet, as opposed to the 18 feet allowed for a single story garage. And when I sort of did a little bit of toing and froing with staff on this, Danielle and laterly Jeff have been very responsive and helpful and quickly getting back and forth on this stuff. But basically, after the first round, I went back to Halliburton Ecolog to see if they could decrease the height. And the answer is no, they can't. It's because of it's sort of a heavy timber structure on the trusses, I gather, and basically it's 26 feet. They can't reduce the height of the kit. So the situation right now is I'm a proud owner of having paid $35,000 for a kit from Halliburton Ecolog that basically is higher than what's allowed under the bylaw. Ergo, this minor variance request.
Any questions with respect to this application? Mr. Bishop?
Yes, Mr. Chair. One of the concepts behind height restriction in the seasonal residential or in this particular zone is to try to maintain a view that's not impacting the view itself. On Glen Lake, we're on a small body of water, and Mr. McWhinney is over on the southeast corner of Glen Lake. I have concerns about this building being visual, more visual than it would be if it was a one-story. I appreciate his catch-22, but zoning bylaws maybe should have been looked at first. Anyway, I'm concerned about that regard. How do you think you can address the view aspect of this particular item, Mr. McWhinney?
Well, I'm not, the staff has visited the site, and I will say this: the height of at 26 feet, the height is not as high as my cottage. The height of my cottage exceeds that probably by a foot or two. It's high. There is no sort of dramatic change in the height of the garage versus my cottage, the location of the garage is not within sight of any other neighbor. The way my lot is configured, there's no other cottages that can see this garage. And the other thing I'd add is it's quite a bit. It's setback from the lake is actually, again, quite a bit more than the setback of my cottage from the lake. So I see, and there's the land in between where I'm proposing to build the garage and the lake is heavily treed. There will be no visual impact at all from the lake or from any of the houses that the neighbors have.
Mr. Walker?
Jerry, may you unmute yourself?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
So I just look at a couple advantages of this property being almost, well, 488 feet in lot frontage. And this proposed building is 105 feet from the lakeshore, appears to be the high water mark. Well, like I say, I think the advantages are it's a well-treed lot with the distances back from the water. And as Mr. McWhinney mentioned, this building is only a couple feet different from the actual cottage. And it does look like there won't be any obstruction to anyone seeing this building on the lake. I would support this application the way it's presented.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a couple of questions or for our staff, I guess, first, and Mr. McWhinney may offer some insights also. One is related to exterior lighting. You haven't put any conditions in, Danielle or Jeff, with respect to exterior lighting on this one. And given the height, I'm wondering if that would be appropriate. That there would be no exterior lighting above a certain height, and maybe no windows that would be above what I'll call the first story level.
You comment on that, Jeff?
Yes, thank you. The bylaw states that there should be no exterior light affixed to a building above 9 meters. It does further state that exterior light fixtures shall be directed downwards. There should be no light trespass on lakes or adjacent properties. If the committee is concerned about lighting being an issue, the committee could put in a condition that recommends that the lights not be higher than a certain distance on that structure. It's something maybe worth discussing, but the bylaw zoning, it would comply with the zoning bylaw as long as it's below 9 meters.
Well, that's, but we're talking here about a building that Mr. McWhinney really wants to be only looking for approval as a single-story garage. It just happens to have an exterior structure that's higher, and so if there were conditions that prohibited him from putting lighting above what would be the first story, prevented him from putting windows in above what would be a 1 story, it starts to limit the risks that the building department has pointed out here that, once this is up, we start to lose control of it, and there's a 2nd story suite in there after the fact. And so if we have these conditions, it would give the neighbors or anybody in that area assurance that, well, there can be no windows on that 2nd story, there can be no lights up there, and therefore, all it could ever be is a storage attic.
Correct.
Would Mr. McWhinney have any concerns with such restrictions?
Yes, I definitely would. I have no concerns with respect to lighting restrictions. Whatever lighting restrictions the committee feels is appropriate is fine with me. We actually are very much in favor of keeping lights down everywhere on that lake. So that element isn't a problem. The restriction with respect to windows is a huge problem because the kit actually has 4 dormers. A huge part of the expense of the kit actually is that there's 4 dormers that need to have windows in them to look so that they don't look ridiculous. That's yeah, the dormers can't be, it's not an option to take the dormers out of there at this point without totally changing the kit and changing what I bought. I will add also that given the height of the structure, the aesthetics of the garage are in my opinion, totally dependent on having those dormers. So
Mr. Walker?
The, no disrespect to anyone with comments about what someone may do in the future, but I do believe we do have bylaws that do regulate or does not permit a cabin or a dwelling above the first story garage. So if that has to be done or wants to be done by the applicant, he must apply for it. And we do have rules that, you know, can be enforced. So I'm just not in favor of projecting that someone may do something when we have laws and bylaws in place to restrict that action. So I would, you know, with Mr. McWhinney mentioning about having dormers with windows, that's part of the construction, and I don't see where we would restrict that as a condition.
perhaps I could,
Just a comment that it is in the report here that the chief building official raised that concern.
Yeah, very appropriate. Any further comments?
could I just add that
Certainly.
throughout the process here, I've become totally aware of the issue with respect to a private cabin. And as part of the issues surrounding this, I have absolutely no intention of creating a additional cabin as part of this project. And I also fully understand that if any change to that effect was contemplated by me or someone else in the future, that requires approval of the municipality.
Fair enough. Mr. Bishop?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is a difficult situation to be in here in that regard, because we all know what does happen within the township area, that things like this do get changed by people who own the property in the future, and that's never applied for on a permit. Mr. McWhinney is between a rock and a hard place, and although I don't have a pocket that would ever sustain $35,000. But here we go again. We're trying to accommodate something that is not the cause of the zoning bylaw. It's being caused by non-investigating what your rules are. I think that within the area that he's going to place this building, and what looks like it's on the property at this point in time, it more than likely won't spoil the view of it from his side, and being back from the water, it maybe not impact the view from the lake or from the other side of the lot or the lake itself. And we've had no comments from other owners within the particular area, but the zoning regulations don't require us to circulate all over the lake. It's within a particular distance. I just don't know what other conditions that could be imposed other than those suggested by staff that would protect the implications of the zoning bylaw, and yet at the same time give Mr. McWhinney the opportunity of proceeding. It's just a hard decision. And I can only suggest here that at this point in time, if we have, if the other members of the committee agree, if he will accept those particular conditions that the municipality and planning department want to put on, I guess we could, subject to their comment, approve of it. Go ahead.
Would you prefer like additional restrictions or additional conditions suggesting that they implement more vegetation around the building?
I don't think that that's an important factor on this situation, looking at the pictures that we've got of the lot itself. It's a lovely lot, okay? It's nice and flat where he's gonna be back from the water. So people in a boat out there could see that he had a garage, but it's not the view on the same plane as the level of the lot or the level of the lake. It's when you're across the lake and you're looking at something that might protrude. Trees die, there's lots of tree cover there, trees die, trees get cut down. But it's something that we just, it's so nebulous to try and figure out conditions here that if you can't make them actually concrete, then there's no sense in putting them on.
Daniel.
Say, let Jeff.
Jeff, would you like to comment on it?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was just going to say, I think this might be a good time to read out the list of conditions for the committee's review as well as the applicant's review. Based on the discussion, I think the committee was considering adding a condition regarding the height of exterior lighting, and I can provide some wording for that. In addition, Danielle might be able to outline another proposed condition by staff with regards to a structure down by the shoreline that wasn't brought to the committee's attention prior to today. So perhaps we can read through those and then have a discussion about the conditions.
So the first condition is that the variance applies to the garage shown on the property sketch. The county tree line shore preservation bylaw. Shoreline tree preservation bylaw applies. Obviously, you have sediment fencing adjacent to the lake. The applicants are obtain a building permit for the garage. The garage shall not be converted into a two-story accessory building without a building permit. If the garage is to be converted into a two-story accessory building, the second story is to adhere to the zoning bylaw provisions. Number 6 is remove or bring the treehouse or private cabin into compliance. And number 7 would be the proposed garage is to have no exterior lights above, would you suggest 18 feet?
I would recommend personally the 5.5 meters, which is the measurement in the bylaw. But again, we defer that to the committee.
5.5 meters,
Is 18 feet.
18.
About 18 feet, yeah.
Mr. Bishop?
I'm wondering here if we're gonna be worrying about this height, that Mr. McWhinney makes sure that in his contractors, so that if he had a surveyor in there at the end of construction that can confirm that the height from ground is no greater than what is granted here. And that would be something that would be very particular, because you can be out 6 inches pretty high in terms of putting in your foundation and the whole works. So maybe we would also need confirmation that the height of the building, when it's completed, is no higher than what's been applied for here.
Fair enough. That condition could go in there too, right?
I can have that.
No. What's your pleasure, gentlemen? Ready for the question? John?
A quick question. What is I looked back over this, I didn't see any shoreline structure. Jeff mentioned something there. What's going on there?
Danielle can comment on
I
that.
wouldn't say it was brought to our attention within the last 2 days, Jeff, that there was a tree house that did have like plywood bunk beds inside of it. So that we've asked that it be brought into compliance because it's 20 feet from the water. So it needs to be beyond the 66.
Oh, it's probably never a permit. How big is it?
It's under the square footage for a permit.
Okay. Gentlemen, how would you like to proceed? So do you want her to reread the conditions that are going to apply? So we're all on the same page, Mr. Walker? Can't hear you. Press your button.
I've had this button on and off too many
There you
times.
go. You're set to go. You're all fired up. and all
Danielle, just a question, is the treehouse an illegal building?
Jeff?
You have to comment
Thank
on
you.
it.
As Danielle mentioned, it did not require a building permit, but it is illegal in the fact that it does not comply with the required minimum water setback. Therefore, staff are recommending a condition that it be removed or brought into compliance. So basically, it would at least need to be moved back to meet the 20-meter minimum water setback requirement.
So to answer that, to bring it into compliance, it has to move, correct?
Correct.
Okay, can we ask the applicant what his intention with that building may be?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. My intention is to comply with the condition as laid out in by staff here. In the absence, let me put it this way, that treehouse has been there for over 20 years. I've got to tell you, the conversation I just had with my grandchildren last night about this issue was not very unpleasant. They suggested I forget my new garage and leave the treehouse where it is. So needless to say, there is huge sentimental value to this treehouse. It's basically, it is nestled in a stand of hemlock trees. It's also totally invisible from the lake, but it's way within the 20-meter setback. I gather that makes it illegal to answer.
That's where the illegal part comes in.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, is there anything other than removal of this treehouse that I could do? But having listened to the conversation today, I'm quite sure I know what the answer is. So so I guess absent any other thing that I could do to address this illegal treehouse, I will remove it. It's quite a removal issue, actually, because of where it is in the trees. I think it's got to be destroyed rather than moved, because it'll be too difficult to get in there with machinery to take it and move it. So in any case, the condition, I gather, is that it be no longer where it is.
As a grandpa, I'd say you made a pretty smart decision.
Yes. So I hope I'm clear on this, my view of this condition. I'm prepared to comply. That's
okay. Danielle?
Would you like me to share my screen and show you a picture of the treehouse so you know what he's talking about?
You want to see a picture of the treehouse, you guys? No, they don't want to see it. Mr. Bishop?
Yeah.
Yeah, in regard to the treehouse, I don't want us or the township having anything to do with the treehouse, because there is a liability aspect to this item as well. So I don't think that the township should be saying it approves of it or disapproves of it. I think you just say remove it.
Fair enough. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's really not in the committee's purvey to waive that requirement for its removal. It's a structure in it, unfortunately, it's a structure in the protected shoreline area. And just as a general matter, we don't allow those. And it's unfortunate as a grandfather myself. But I always say to people, when you do these things, someday it's going to come back. And it sounds like it took 20 years, but.
Yeah.
Mr. Isles.
Thank you. I would just like to point out the municipality historically has recognized the sentimental value of tree houses and their temporary use. And historically, we have overlooked them when it comes to the provisions for the number of accessory buildings on a lot, that type of thing. However, they are still required to comply with the setback provisions of bylaws, height restrictions, that kind of thing. So that's where we're running into issues here. I just wanted to point that out. We understand a difficult decision for Mr. McWhinney, but it's the setback that we're concerned about.
Okay. We're ready for the question? Be it resolved, the committee's decision with respect to file D13 MV 2021-028 be recorded as follows. A variance to the provisions of section 5.2 to permit a one-story accessory building to have a maximum height of 8 meters or 26 feet, as opposed to the permitted 5.5 meters of 18 feet. Someone move that we is granted. Mr. Bishop, are you going along with it? It will be subject to the conditions as read by Danielle, Mr. McQuinney.
Understood.
Much as I'd like to be on the side of your grandkids, maybe you can find another tree.
That's the next conversation we have. I mean, it's a lot better than when they tell me to forget my new garage.
Anyway, the motion is granted.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much for, actually, I was of two minds before I heard you speak. So thank you very much for presenting a different side to the story, which has a lot to do with what's going on.
Well, thank you. And thank you to the committee. And thank you very much to Jeff and Danielle.
You're entirely welcome. Okay, so here we go. Is Mr. Grenow, is he hooked in?
I'm just loading Andrew's the son and Mr. Barrett is, Barrett is the applicant.
Barrett and Andrew Grenow.
Yep.
So there's nothing different on this as opposed to what was originally.
Number D, they do not require.
So is he not going to appear?
Yep, I'm just asking them to prompt their video and ask them to unmute.
I was putting in a good order in lunch.
Here we go.
Mr. Grenow, are you there?
Yes, good morning.
Good. Welcome to Halliburton.
Well, thank you. We do love it there.
Well, it's not heaven, but you can see it from here.
Well, I like that.
You'd like to comment on your proposal? You wanted to start the discussion off with you with some comments from you?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would. Just to give you a bit of a background, my son owns the property immediately adjoining where my problem is. And what I'm trying to do is just make things as legal as I can.
They're not shades of black. There's either black or white.
Well, that's true. I had my will drawn up with Bishop and Rogers 3 or 4 years ago. And at that
You're
point,
still alive. Yeah, that's pretty good.
is this Mr. Bishop?
This is the Bishop of, he's retired from Bishop and Rogers.
Oh, well, very good, very good. I guess I didn't use you then, sir. I used your partner. But anyway, at that point, my wife and I decided that we were going to will our property to our son, Andrew. And the problem that I've created with my 5 inches being over the property line is on my son's property. If we simply gave him the property, he amalgamated the property together, all our issues that we're now going to talk about will be dissolved. And what I didn't want to do was handicap Andrew by not allowing him to build the cottage that he wants to build. So that's why I'm applying for the variance so that we can leave things basically the way they are. When he comes on, he can have the rest of my 5 minutes to talk. He has absolutely no objections whatsoever, whatever is what we have put in place. My neighbor on the one side, Rosie, said she absolutely has no problem. My nearest neighbor on the other side of Andrew is still 500 feet away. That's Barry Browse. He has a cottage there. We are 120 feet from the high water mark. We are an elevation of about 95 feet from the water. We're well back. There is not a soul that can see what we are proposing. And if Andrew is there and he would like to add in, go for it.
Thank you very much. I would, and my apologies, my camera decided not to work this morning. I have absolutely zero issues what's being proposed. I know a lot of talk about vegetation, etc. And I know there's lots of natural vegetation that's right by that lot line. But again, I would have zero objections to what's being opposed today.
Well, I'm sure we have probably some input into this, but I'll ask for questions from the board members. First off, Mr. John Smith.
Thank you. So you've given a little different context to this than I grasped from the report. But I'm curious if there's so amenable here, why are you cutting back on the overhang in response to the municipality's concerns?
Well, what one of the pictures that we sent you show, I did trespass by 5 inches over the property line when I built my shed.
Yeah.
And at first I thought, could I just cut that 5 inches off? It's not going to bother the integrity of the building. And then I thought, no, I want to do this legal. I went and had it all surveyed. Now I'd like your input as to whether I just need to get a building permit to bring it up to code, if in fact it's not up to code. We are quite willing to get permits to do anything just to get it legal.
Mr. Bishop.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Well, I appreciate the attitude that Mr. Greenhow has in regard to his son Andrew and his son Andrew's attitude towards his parent. In the future, the idea is that this would all become Andrew's and it would be one parcel of land.
That is correct.
I would, first of all, wills get changed. Secondly, even if Andrew did receive it, he would be getting advice from time to time to keep the pieces of land separate. But then he'd have to choose against that. What we have to do here is we can't pay attention to what your will is, Mr. Greenhow. We have to pay attention to the fact that we have two separate pieces of property, and that's the way they exist at this point in time. And that's how we have to treat them. They both have to meet the zoning bylaws that are applicable at the time of the construction. And they both have to have all the necessary permits. That's just a fact. So while I appreciate the family attitude, it's not something that can be dealt with here as a conclusion towards the finalization of the situation.
Okay.
I hope you understand.
Yes, yeah, I'm here listening and wanting advice, and how do we proceed?
John Smith first and then Joe Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask as a follow-up to my other question. Okay, so you're trying to eliminate some of the overhang there. Would it not be a legitimate alternative? I don't know exactly how wide this lot next door that your son currently owns is, but oftentimes when these situations have occurred on a historical basis, someone's made a deal to actually, for a price, change the boundary lines between you and your son. That may be easier to do from an economic point of view, but it would then maintain the integrity of the lot lines relative to the building. And as I said, within the family, that might be easier to do. I don't know, Jeff, if we've seen this with regard to driveways where people have had these things or other buildings that were found to be overhanging or in the wrong spot. And they said, okay, well, we can buy a piece of property from the neighbor and they work at a price and it resolves the issue after the fact. Could that be a solution here?
I think that's probably a good suggestion.
Yeah, fine by me. Andrew, would you object to that?
I have no objection with that.
Okay. Excuse me. My only concern there is we're fully aware now of setbacks. So when Andrew builds his cottage, if you don't mind, we'll talk in feet. He has to be 15 feet back on both sides. So that's 30 feet. If I bought 15 feet of his property, which he's saying I could do, that's another 15 feet less that he could use for his new building. So that would be 45 feet, which leaves him 55 feet for a width of a cottage. And I guess I just didn't want to go to my grave knowing that I've left him with a problem like that.
I'm sure you wouldn't have a problem giving it to somebody else if you wanted. Anyway, we have a comment from Mr. Walker.
Okay.
There's my mute button. So 2 questions. Number 1, we're dealing with the shed. And is that the lot line that we're talking about? The neighbor or the son is beside the shed, or is he on the other side?
He's on that side.
So how big is the shed, and can you not move the shed?
Shed is gone.
Jerry, the
Well,
shed, so for variance D, the shed was demolished.
The shed's
Oh,
not
so
the
we're
issue,
not-
it's
so
the
we're
addition
only
they put on
dealing
the
with-
cottage
So we're dealing with the deck on the cottage now
And the dwelling.
and the addition, yeah.
and the dwelling. Okay, so sorry, I didn't, so the shed part
So
of
we
it is
deal with
gone?
3.
Okay. So we're dealing with the deck and the building too close to the line. Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
3 variances are requested.
right, just for the actual deck.
There's 4 yeah, she had it printed before she knew it was gone, so.
Right, so, okay, that clarifies it. I thought we were dealing with the shed. So,
Mr. Bishop?
Yes, just to clarify a couple things, I want to make sure that Jerry's on side here. Andrew owns part 37, Jerry. That's the part that is to the immediate west of the subject lands,
Correct.
Correct.
okay? Now, just to speak to the concept of Andrew agreeing to sever off a portion of his lands and deed it and consolidate it with the balance of the ownership of his father, would require a survey and a severance, and that he would just daylight the situation to
Right.
make it comply. That's a procedure that is available to him in this regard. There's no doubt about it. He should investigate the costs of it and the time factors that would be involved in it. It does not solve the problems that he's got with his particular building if he wants to, because we are now on notice of what his problems are. And he should consult with a lawyer to get advice in regard to a severance procedure. In regard to this situation, however, I would suggest to Mr. Greenhow and through the chair that we have to deal with this as a single parcel of land as it stands at this point in time. If he wants us to proceed with this idea on the application that he's got forward, we can today, or he can defer this to get further advice as to what his options might be. So I think that before we throw out any suggestions, he's on the horns of a dilemma. He'll have to make that choice.
Well, Mark Twain once said, keep land, my son, because you aren't making any more of it. And it would seem to me that if I was in Mr. Greenhouse's situation, I would want 2 lots, not 1 lot. So if you can pursue that possibility, I mean, you know how expensive lakefront property is now. I mean, everybody knows that. So does 2 beat 1? I'm from Penetang and it still counts 2 beats 1 every time. And I think that Mr. Bishop brings up a very solid proposal, is that we defer this application and give you some time to maybe think through some of these processes. But eventually, we have to work with you to solve the problem, particularly with the encroachment of the eaves into the other person's property, or in this case, it'd be the same person, but I'd want to get some legal advice with respect to that. So I don't know. This doesn't mean that you have to reapply. It means that your application is just deferred based on getting more information. You don't have to repay, you don't have to do anything. And I think that would be an appropriate decision in this particular case.
Okay.
Would you be in agreement with that?
Yeah,
John?
Danielle?
I was gonna say, Jeff has had his hand up, so he has a question.
Sorry, Jeff.
Thank you, Chair.
Doesn't work real good.
Thank you, Chair. Before we move to a deferral or a decision, perhaps staff could help answer some questions that you may have. Alternatively, perhaps a site inspection might be appropriate so that the committee members could have a better look at what's going on the property and see what options are available. As mentioned by committee member Bishop and Smith, perhaps the more appropriate long-term solution would be a consent for a lot addition. However, again, that is up to the applicant. Just looking at the properties, given that the adjacent property is undersized for today's standards, it would still require a minor variance for a reduction in lot area or frontage to proceed. So there are approval processes required through the county and through DICERT to go that avenue, but that is up to the applicant to determine how to proceed. I just want to advise that we are here today to look at the variances before us, being the setbacks for the deck, the eaves, and the addition to the dwelling. Staff are available for questions, but a site inspection might be appropriate.
Okay.
Okay, if
Mr.
you
Walker?
folks, sorry,
Sorry,
go
Jeff.
ahead. I was just going to say, if you folks have snowshoes, you're welcome to come up anytime, because we are the last cottage on a dead end road, and that road does not get plowed. So you would have to drive in and then walk in the last 200 or 300 meters. And my son Andrew would be more than happy to meet with any of you or all of you at your convenience to show you exactly what the situation is.
Oh, that's very kind. Mr. Walker?
Was it, just a couple questions, did you consider removing the deck and then just do a minor variance for the eaves? Is that an option?
Yes, it could be. We certainly love our deck. When we first bought the cottage, it had a very, very small deck, and that's why we extended it westward to go back to the original small deck. It would be an inconvenience, but I suppose, yes, it would be an option.
So that, in Mr. Bishop's suggestion of deferral, when you look at all the options, then you might find that a deck removal might be more cost friendly. And as Mr. Isles has mentioned about going for minor variances, whatever, to decrease lot size, etc. So investigation might be the best option here.
Okay.
Mr. Bishop?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're in this application that's in front of us, though, we're not dealing just with the encroachment of the eaves here. We're looking at this shed attachment to the building, and it is not meeting the sideline requirements either, okay? So it was a shed, and then it's been attached to the one-story frame cottage, making it part of the one-story frame cottage. And so let's not lose sight of the fact that these applications are not just the encroachment of the eaves into the neighboring lands, or an application to have the eaves be zero. It's an application to deal with this encroachment of the shed, which they've attached to the cottage, into their sideline. And if we take a look at that very closely from the pictures that I'm seeing, it was a shed at one time that they've now attached. That shed could be removed. And then you'd be dealing with a different sideline setback. So let's not lose sight of what is involved in the application for the minor variance. And let's not lose sight, Mr. Greenow, of what you might do to correct this whole thing. And there are two different procedures. So I think
So you
my
suggesting a
suggestion
site
is he
visit?
needs to get some advice.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, that would be excellent.
John Smith?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think your suggestion of a deferral on this one is the best thing to do for Mr. Greenhow. Because frankly, I think if we voted on it today, we would just reject his application. And then he'd have to go away and do some work and either demolish a part of the structure he's created. But if you defer it, you don't need to pay another fee. You can consider some of the comments today and some of the options you might have going forward, and come back with a revised proposal. Because as Mr. Bishop has pointed out, it's not just a small eave, it's the whole addition you've put on this cottage, which I guess I hadn't realized, but it actually was formerly the shed. It may have been the case, but it's a big issue. And frankly, when I looked at this package, I thought, man, there's no way we can approve this. And I've seen nothing today that changes my mind. So at least the chair's suggestion of a deferral gives you a chance without paying another fee to review your alternatives and come back with one that might be more acceptable. Because I don't think this one's going to fly.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate that. Now, when would you folks like to come? Would you like to defer a visit to the site till the weather improves? Or should we get this under control in the next 2 or 3 months?
Well, we don't necessarily, I'm not sure where we should go with that. Did you have a comment, Mr. Bishop?
Well, if we're going to defer it along with a site visit, Mr. Chair, then we're going to have to
Let's do it.
defer it into spring. There's no doubt about that, in my opinion,
Yeah.
because that's when we're going to be able to have the best view of what the situation is. But that would also give Mr. Messrs. Greenow, the two of them, to seek some good legal advice as to the procedure that they could pursue. I better be careful because I don't want to give false hope or legal advice. I'm not a lawyer anymore. But I think that's where they should look at. They might choose to do a severance in due course, but they also might choose to continue on with some minor variance application.
Okay, so if I'm reading this correctly, then if I bought 10 feet or 15 feet or 3 meters, whatever, from Andrew, attached it to my lot, then that would put me in compliance?
It would all depend, Mr. Greenhow. We're not here to give you legal advice. The lots were created years ago. They have some undersized problems with them, and it might not be worthwhile for you to do that course, but it's not up to us to give you that advice. You have to get that from an independent legal advisor that's schooled in what the requirements of severance are and what the requirements of zoning are, so that you can meet both situations and make the proper choice.
Okay,
And even if you choose not to do, say, the severance side, and you go along with the concept of trying to do the minor variance side, you might not get what your minor variance asks. So you have to meet all kinds of planning requirements.
Yeah.
And I don't want to talk out of tune with Jeff or Danielle in regard to the procedures that are involved here.
Okay. Did you want to say that?
I was just going to put note that if that was an option, staff would help you review the zoning bylaw and compliances for the interior side lot line, but we'd have to see a proposal.
Okay.
Well, what I'm reading is that we should defer the application based on a site visit. Are we in agreement with that? Mr. Bishop? Yeah. So.
Yes, I'm in a site visit in the
So
spring.
it's be it resolved, the committee's decision with respect to file D13 MV 2021-20029 be recorded as deferred based on a site visit and further information from the applicant regarding the case. We in favor of that?
Sorry, just one comment about a site visit. I don't mind doing that. But if Mr. Greenhow goes to a planning consultant or whoever and decides that he's going to tear things off, we
Right.
wouldn't have to do a site visit. So I
Right.
would
So
put the
we'll wait
site
for some
visit
more
depending
information from him.
on the deferral.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that's gone through. Good.
Well, thank you,
So-
gentlemen.
Well, thank you
Andrew?
for your attendance and any comments made by Mr. Bishop today were free of charge, but
Well,
No, they were made as not a lawyer.
yeah, well, that's,
I hear you.
okay, well, we'll be in touch and get some advice and get back in touch with you folks then.
Thank you very much.
Thank
very
you.
much, folks.
Okay. Who we got next? Yeah. Simpson and North on Drag Lake.
Yep.
That's a place close to home. So Chris Bishop is representing.
Chris Bishop is, but he's not in the meeting.
He's not available.
No, he hasn't joined the meeting.
Well, you want to just defer this?
It's entirely up to you. You are able to discuss the application if you wish. And Jeff also has a point.
Thank you. I was just going to suggest we can proceed in their absence. They haven't asked for it to be deferred.
Yeah,
So we can either go directly to questions. If the committee has any questions, we're happy to answer them. We could probably give a quick
I think we can deal with it.
history if
Hey.
needed.
I think we could deal with it. It's basically compliance with respect to the location of the cottage, which was built with a previous allowance for a minor variance, but somehow slipped through the cracks and it's too close to the lake based on that. So we probably I don't have a whole big problem sorting that out because whether we do anything with the deck or whatever, that's up to you guys. So, Mr. John Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question on this thing, I guess Jeff or Danielle, but there was a permission granted to build with a 48-foot setback. And somehow it's become a 41-foot setback. How do these things happen? I mean, it's not the building department's responsibility when they go out to do a site inspection to confirm that there's been a proper, survey stake put in the ground, is it not?
I would think.
Back in 78, I'm not sure if they required them to stake that variance boundary.
I think I was on this committee then, but I don't remember this one.
Yeah, but if it's, if we gave them permission for 48 and they built it the wrong place, there needs to be some consequences for that, not just, oh, sorry, you could have built it 20 feet from the lake. And we're just going to kind of say, oh, well, that's too bad. Here's your approval and go on your way.
I'd say that for one of no one else to blame, when the building department inspect, they should have caught that. So
I don't think the building department's responsible for going out and measuring the location of the building.
Well,
They're there to inspect the integrity of the construction.
Well, I think part of that might be though that, like, I see places going up. I don't go and measure them, but I know that they don't comply to what we're talking about. So who's going to connect with that? I can point you in one right now, but unless you got a tape and go and check it, you're not really sure. So,
Don?
Mr. Walker, and then Danielle.
Sorry, yeah, I think today's rules and today's world's a lot different than 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever. And we're running into this all the time. Partner, one application a month is to bring something into compliance. You know, we've discussed about, you know, the stakes on the corner, the stakes on the line, who put them there? We all know that stakes get moved, and you know, the only true way to do it in my mind is an OLS that confirms where things are built and where they're planned. And back in the day, that was unheard of. No one did that. So I think our duty is to try and help people to make things into conformity the best we can. And so many of these properties have changed hands. So people are, you know, they're finding out later that it doesn't comply. So that's kind of our mandate in my mind. So what's happened has happened, and we just have to go forward.
Danielle, and then Dave.
So we did add a condition in the staff report saying if granted, the variance for the dwelling at the water setback of 12 or at the 41 feet is for the current dwelling. Any future reconstruction of the dwelling must comply with the 14.6 meters or the 48 feet granted in 1978.
78, 98. So that's 41 years ago.
1978.
We probably didn't even have a typewriter. Dave?
Listen, we're into a discussion of the problems that we've got here, and I disagree that it is not the responsibility of the bylaw officer to ensure the location of the building before he signs it off. And he can request the proof of it. The applicant makes a building permit application on the basis that they are going to meet sideline setbacks and front line setbacks and rear line setbacks. And the bylaw officer can go out there and say, I need to know how far this foundation is from these particular places because you signed for it. And it's up to the bylaw officer to ask for and ensure that that is enforced. And if council is not telling the bylaw officer that that's what he or she is supposed to do, then council's the one that's deficient. And they've been deficient, as Jerry has said, on application almost once a month here. And it's not our obligation as a committee of adjustment to correct mistakes that are caused through councils not instructing their people as to what their job description is. There, I've said my point.
Well, you definitely covered a lot of areas there. When the horse is out of the barn, it's a little bit tough to tie him back up. That's the problem.
Yep. And then they put it on you and I as a committee members.
John Smith.
Well, two further points. Do we know that the deck on this cottage was constructed consistent with the building? Is this the original deck, or is this a deck that's been rebuilt since 1978? Because it looks, you know, photographed like it could be newer.
I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah.
Most decks and stair structures like that don't survive for 43 years and be in the condition that this lumber looks to be in.
I thought we had a notice that the deck had not had a permit.
Do you have a comment, Jeff?
Thank you. I was going to provide a bit of background with regards to the survey requirements, everything like that, if you like. What I was doing right now is quickly looking to see if we had record of a building permit for the deck, which I don't believe we do. Having said that, I'm not sure the municipality always requires building permits for smaller decks located at the shorelines. So I defer to the committee with regards to the deck, how they want to treat that in the context of the variance. It's not necessarily related to the history of that dwelling, which, given the background, they tried to follow the proper process. They applied for a minor variance. It was granted. They applied for a building permit. It was approved and constructed. But I certainly agree with the concerns of the committee today with regards to these continued applications where historic development doesn't comply with what was permitted. And there could be various reasons for that. I will admit, my opinion is that the building department staff are not surveyors, so they are not qualified to take accurate measurements. And it can be difficult for waterfront lots to take an accurate measurement because that high water mark is not a straight line, and there could be little inlets that change that setback. So I just want to point that out. The committee's correct. Council has not historically supported the extra costs of surveys for the building permit process. To date, that's still the case. However, going back 10 years or so, we've now started requiring conditions on minor variances that an OLS confirm the locations of buildings approved by the Committee of Adjustment. In addition, the building department is now requiring, I think, the staked location of buildings that are within a certain distance of required setbacks, or at least the water setback. So the municipality has taken steps a bit recently to try and correct this going forward, but we are looking at a lot of past mistakes recently, and I do agree with that.
I think Mr. Smith.
My second point, Mr. Chair, is that the detached deck, we had a situation just 3-4 months ago where someone had a detached deck that coincidentally around the same size as this one, over 300 square feet, when they're not to be bigger than 215 square feet. And just happened to be down the road from me, one of my neighbors, and myself and the committee said, you better, tear up part of that deck, because the maximum you're allowed to have is the 215 square feet as per our zoning bylaw. And so to do anything differently in this case would be, outrageous in my mind, because we've established a pattern there. You'll have to shrink that deck, reduce the size, but thank you very much.
Make it comply. Well, I think there's another point that Mr. Smith brought up, which is appropriate. What would happen if the guy built this thing 20 feet closer to the lake? So you'd be at 21 feet. Like, so there's no, if there's no control, you're sort of up against it, and these always end up with us to straighten them out. But somehow I think there's a middle party that's required on it. I could take you to one right now that I know what's going to happen. It's going to be this same as this writing here. Anyway, Mr. Bishop.
Well, in this case here, again, there's no assurance that this deck structure with the stairs and so forth that are going down so close to the lake were actually part of the original building permit back in 1978. Certainly that lumber hasn't been there since 1978, based on my observation.
That's a long time, 1978.
43 years, doesn't stand up that way.
Well, you have better lumber in Halliburton. Mr. Bishop.
I agree with respect of the oversized deck, that they're gonna have to cut it back. I'm not in favor of granting a variance in that regard. But I want to come back to this other issue. We're gonna see a county bylaw on shoreline setbacks, and they're gonna want it enforced. So let's try and think about this process, and maybe we should ask Jeff and Danielle to have council clarify what the obligations of their bylaw officer are. Because this has been history throughout the aspect of this township. I've seen this issue from 60. And everybody had bugaboos about surveys and the cost of proving what the situation is. Well, now the cost is really strong because we're approving things that are closer to the water than they should have been because of bylaw officers or bylaws not being specific enough as to how you ensure that the zoning is applicable. Sorry to be so pedantic. In regard to the situation on hand on this application, I am in agreement with what Mr. Smith has said. But again, in order for these people to have a compliance in this regard, they've got to purchase part of the 66-foot shore road allowance. So even if we approve of this, as discussed this morning, it would be conditional upon the completion of their purchase of the 66-foot shore road allowance. So it would not be a compliance from this committee until that was part of their ownership.
Danielle.
This minor variance did come out of them asking the council to purchase the shore road allowance, and council did ask, or council, or it did say council declares that the lands be surplused, but imposed to the conditions the applicant submit a minor variance application for the non-complying water setback to the dwelling.
Okay.
See, that's another example of council passing their problem onto this committee.
John Smith.
Just to be clear, when this did come to council, council was very clear in stating that they were not imposing any decision on this committee, that this committee should exercise its judgment in the normal fashion. All they were doing was giving the applicant permission to approach the committee about property they did not yet own. And so, in terms of resolving this, the claim that the deck is closer than the 48 feet, could be resolved based on the examination of the building permit back at the day in 1978 was approved. Frankly, if these stairs and so forth have been added since 1978, since there was last a building inspection, I don't feel a particular obligation to approve this. Because in fact, what we would be endorsing is, go ahead and build what you want, where you want, and then come and seek approval from the Committee of Adjustment after the fact. That's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. Danielle.
So the variance is for the dwelling, not the deck. Just to clarify that.
Well, the deck is.
The deck is also located on the shore road allowance, but the dwelling is what doesn't comply.
So why did they ask for a variance for the deck?
Sorry, just to clarify, that second variance is for the detached deck down at the shoreline, not the one
Of the
attached to
shoreline.
the dwelling. That's right. The detached deck exceeds the I guess the gross floor area requirements. It's over 20 square meters.
Okay.
Then, sorry, Jeff, is the deck on the cottage and the stairs that come down there, are those all legal?
I believe we reviewed them and they do comply with the zoning bylaw.
Mr. Walker.
So the dwelling is part one minor variance, which encroaches, and then the deck is another minor variance. Is that correct?
Separate one.
So, yeah, so we pretty well have to deal with the dwelling because you're not going to make them move the dwelling. And then the deck, I think as discussed, is that we make them bring that into compliance in the square footage. Would that be fair?
But I'm seeing a lot of nods that would agree. You want to do
But
that?
it's conditional on them acquiring the 66-foot shore road allowance.
And I have a problem with that because I don't think it's this committee's mandate to enforce a regulation that you imply to a landowner that they must buy something and go through that expense when it's not necessary in any case. in my
They've
mind.
already proceeded on that, Jerry. They're in the.
So they've
process
already
of
done
filing.
that, that's fine, but are you gonna, that implies that we're gonna, use that condition and further minor variances? I don't agree with that. I
All
don't
we're
think
saying is that they are to complete their application for the purchase of the shore road allowance. They've already
Okay.
made the application. It's already in the process and it's to be completed.
Right, okay, on this instant only, and they've already applied, so that's a given. Okay.
Well,
I can
We have
go
a
with that.
second one like this in this procedure coming up, Jerry, okay?
Right,
Jeff,
I was gonna mention something, but it was answered, so I'm okay. Thank you, Chair.
where do you want to go with this, with number 5 here with respect to the legal non-complying building and the, you want to deal with this now? I'd say we deal with it.
A is granted and B is denied,
We all in agreement on that?
but on the basis that they fully complete the shore road allowance, as we discussed.
I have added a condition.
What is it?
I added the condition that the applicants must complete the shore road allowance application.
How did we even know they were trying to do that? How how did we know they were buying the shoreline?
They went to council and then asked if they could put a variance on the property that they didn't own yet.
Oh, yeah, okay,
So they've already submitted. This was a result of them applying for the shore road allowance.
okay, we'll put that condition on.
So Jeff also has a question.
Okay, well, let's put this to bed then.
Don,
Hmm?
Jeff has a question.
Yep, Jeff does?
I was just gonna mention one other thing, and I think Danielle mentioned it earlier, with regards to concerns about structures not being built where they were approved by either a variance or a building permit. Staff have proposed a condition that basically says the variance that's going to be granted today applies to that existing structure only. So if there's to be a complete demolition and reconstruction, it is to move back and comply with the required setback that was granted in 1978, I believe it is, at 48 feet. So that's the way we've tried to address these historic errors that keep coming back, is that they apply to the existing structure, but when rebuilt, it's got to go back to where it was supposed to be, where it was approved by building permit, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention to see if they were satisfied with that.
Okay, well, let's put this one to bed here. Be it resolved, the committee's decision with respect to file D13 MV 2021-31 be recorded as follows. Variance to provision of section 5.2 to permit a dwelling to have a minimum water setback of 12.5 meters or 41 feet as opposed to the legal non-compliant setback of 14.6 meters or 48 feet is granted. Correct?
Yep.
Variance provision is section 3.1 to permit a detached deck to have a gross floor area of 28.7 square meters or 310 square feet as opposed to permitted 20 square meters or 213 square feet is denied. Carried. We're moving on here. We'll have to order in dinner shortly. So we have one left here. Mr. Darren,
Yeah.
or is it Mrs. Darren?
I believe Allison is joining today.
Allison?
I'm just bringing them on the screen now.
Well, this actually is what Councillor Bishop has just been talking about is the Brian the shore allowance, right?
Yes,
So where are they at with that?
it is currently at the lawyers in the final stages.
So should we be granting it until they get it? You can comment on that, Jeff.
Yeah, if I could just give a bit of background. So the applicant applied quite a while ago to purchase their shore road allowance so that they can proceed with construction of the proposed garage. The application to purchase the shore road allowance is taking a lot longer than hoped. Therefore, the applicants went to council to request the submission of a minor variance application on property being the shore road allowance. So council approved that request, being that Mr. and Mrs. Darren can make application to the committee today with regards to the requested variances. So in my opinion, the committee can proceed today. I don't think it's necessary to delay this. Similar to the last application, staff would recommend a condition that prior to the issuance of a building permit, if the committee, of course, grants the requested variance, prior to the issuance of a building permit, that the applicant complete the application to close the shore road allowance. So that's just some history and some staff recommendation with regards to the shore road allowance.
So you want to proceed then?
Yes.
Yep, okay. And this, Allison, would you like to comment further to what Jeff's had to say on the application?
Not really, no. Don't have anything to say. You know, we want to build a garage at our cottage so that we can shelter our vehicles, you know, 2-car garage with a carport. And we did apply for the shore road allowance purchase. So that was originally because our cottage crossed the line a bit on there, and a little bit onto the shore road allowance. So we had to purchase it before proceeding with this garage plan.
So basically, Jeff, what you're saying is we should deal with this now, right?
In my opinion, I think we should deal with this today.
Jerry?
Ultimately, it's up to the committee, but I think it would be unnecessary to delay this any further.
Jerry?
I had a look at the application, the pictures, etc. My only question, I have no problem with the minor variance, including regarding the lot coverage, but I'm just questioning the setback from the street. I think it's 12 feet. In the pictures there, it looks like there could be an opportunity to increase that setback. And I'm just wondering if there is an opportunity there, maybe another 6 or 8 feet back from the street. That would be my only concern. It looked like there was room there to maybe move it back to reduce that ask of the setback.
Would you like to comment on that, Allison?
Oh, okay. The reason that the garage is positioned there is that, you know, just to the front of it, there's a hill, incline, a sharp hill between the garage plan and the cottage. So that prevents it from being moved further closer to the house.
Bishop?
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Bishop?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering whether the applicant could address, this is a rather substantial size of garage, which is one of the factors that increases the lot coverage. What, is there not an ability to make the garage a little bit smaller and comply with it in that fashion? I mean, it's bigger than your cottage, really.
Well, it's a 2-car garage with a carport. So, you know, we wanted the 2-car spaces for each of our cars. And my mother-in-law will be staying with us, and she still drives, so need the three places, a carport and two-car garage.
Okay. But you could, if it was reduced to meeting the setback and even squeezing the building towards your cottage a little bit with some excavation, if you just cut that down a little bit in size, you'd be able to meet the setback requirements. So it's really not, it's not something that's physically restraining you from having a garage. It's just restraining you from having an extra large garage and carport.
Just for the setback variance, you're saying to
Yeah.
Reduce the size or to move it back?
Yeah, do one or the other. One thing about it, you're asking for two variances here. One is to reduce the setback from the street, and the other is to allow you to have more area coverage of your property with buildings.
So, which is it that is that we could adjust there, the setback from the road or the lot coverage?
Well, if you, as an example, if you cut down on the size of your building, then that the width of the building or the depth of the building would be less, which would give you a greater setback from the road. And it would also decrease the amount of coverage of your buildings on the lands. It's a matter of maybe trying to refigure your configuration on the garage to accommodate as much as you need. But reduce its overall size. The lot is not preventing you from having a garage. It's preventing you from having an oversized garage, a 3-car garage, or a 2-car garage with a carport. Can you understand what I mean?
Well, yeah, that's the reason why we came to committee, was to provide the carport. If we were going to have a carport, we wouldn't have needed any variance at all.
Which side is the carport on?
It's going to be, I believe, next to the road.
John Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I think Mr. Bishop shares a concern that I have. Even after purchasing the shore road allowance area, they're applying for coverage of over 18%.
18.3.
18.3. That's more than 22% larger than is permitted. 15% is allowed. And so we're talking an increase there beyond the the permit of 22%, 18.3 versus 15.0. And have all the sympathy in the world for a need to have a 2-car garage for the owners, and even a carport to accommodate the mother-in-law, if I recall you said. But the fact of the matter is, you don't need a structure that's 40 feet by 42 feet to accommodate 3 cars. And so whether they make it not as deep or what, the property isn't big enough to support the structure that they're proposing to construct here. And so a minor variance might be, as we've proved elsewhere, 15.5, 15.9. But when you get over 18, that's not a minor variance, in my opinion. That's just too large. And so it suggests that the applicant reduce the size of the proposed garage, whether they take it all the way down to make 15.0. May not need to do that, but it's got to be a lot smaller than the current proposal to get it to be a lot less than 18 and an increase to the permitted size. As I said, right now the requested variance is more than 22%. That's too large to be called minor, in my opinion.
Fair enough.
Normally we do plan everything very well, but we only found out that this lot coverage would be that high a couple of weeks ago. So at this point, we just continued forward, because this is being, the application has been started in October of 2017. And at that time, we did discuss, we gave our plans for review to the planning department. And at that time, the lot coverage was determined to be about 16. And that was with the new garage. So we thought we were fine to go forward with it. And it's only a couple of weeks ago that we found out that the decks should have been included in that calculation. So we kind of went forward with it, but normally we do plan everything ahead, and we thought 16 coverage was reasonable at the time.
Danielle?
And it's been 2 years since we put in our application, because waiting for this minor variance or waiting for this shore road allowance purchase to go through. So we've kind of been on ice with this plan for 2 years. You know, we submitted it over almost 2 years ago. And
To give the committee just a rough idea of what roughly 16% would look like. So a 30 by 40 building is 16.1% if the shore road allowance is continued through.
Mr. Walker?
What's the square footage of the shed? Do we have an
Oh,
idea
it's
what
just
the
10 by
size of
10.
that,
It's
what
10
the
by 10.
size of the shed?
Yeah.
It's 100 square feet, so 10 by 10.
So that's 100 square feet. Okay. Is that an option to remove the shed?
Yes, it could be. Because, you know, we'd have the garage. The shed was kind of for storage before you know, before this planned garage.
Without the shed, the lot coverage at the remaining size of the garage is 17.9%.
17.9.
So
Well,
could we propose that they go with the proposal as is and remove the shed? Would that make a compromise?
John Smith?
To me, 17.9 is still too large. The problem here is the size, this 42 by 40 odd feet structure. And that's way more than you need for 3 cars. And so great to remove the shed. It could be a step in the right direction. But to me, anything when you get over 16% when the limit is 15 is more than a minor variance.
Mr. Bishop?
Yes, Mr. Chair. To some extent, I agree with Mr. Smith in regard to coverages on lakefront property, where we're trying to make sure that the property and the lake looks like it's in the environment of a lake and cottagers or houses, and not to show the parcel of land fully occupied with buildings. But what we have here also, Mr. Chair, we have a decision earlier today in regard to a property on the same body of water. It's up at the top end of the Halliburton Lake. This is at the bottom end of the lake, where in regard to a rear line setback, we granted a setback of 16 feet, whereas this application is for a setback of greater than that. And we dealt with a lot coverage aspect of a little over the 15%, and the people arrived at that by reducing the size of their garage. So I think that there is something that we have to make sure that we make sure we're bananas and bananas on this application. So in this regard, a sideline or a rear line setback of 16 feet would be applicable, in my opinion. In regard to the lot coverage, I agree with Mr. Smith that this is a large garage for more than 3 cars. And that the garage could be cut down in size and they could meet a size of 16 or 16.3%, or maybe even less. So I think that either they redraw the garage and figure out what their requirements are and redraw what their setbacks be.
Why don't we just put the limit on what lot coverage they can have? So are we happy at 16? Jerry?
I like Dave's suggestion of being very close or matching what we granted this morning on the previous application. Keeps us consistent, and I think that's a good move in the right direction.
Okay.
Jeff has a question.
Jeff?
Thank you. I just had a comment that might help us move forward. So based on the conversation, it appears the committee would like to see that the rear lot line setback increased by 4 feet to 16 feet. So looking at the plan, that would remove 4 feet from the proposed garage at a dimension of 40 feet long. So we're looking at roughly 160 square feet removed from that garage to facilitate that increased setback. Danielle, do you have your spreadsheet? Are you able to open to punch in 520 square feet for lot coverage?
What the decrease would be?
I didn't follow his last part.
Sorry, if we remove 180 square feet from, or sorry, 160 square feet from the garage, which is proposed at 1,680 square feet, we're left with 520 square feet. So I was just wondering what that resulting lot coverage would be, and Danielle might be able to calculate that for us.
So if the total garage area would be 1,520 square feet, it would be 17.1%.
Down.
And the shed?
And that is
John?
without the shed.
So I'm not sure that we don't have a situation here where somebody's bought a kit yet. They're interested in building a garage. I think we could prescribe a percentage coverage, 16%. The other one was actually 16. They reduced the size of the garage to achieve that. And so to approve it here with the lot setback of 16 feet, I think we were talking about, and 16%, and then leave it to the owners to decide whether they want to keep their shed and have a smaller garage, or get rid of the shed and have a little bigger garage. That becomes their choice. But they'll know that the restraint is 16% lot coverage, and we want to, the back lot setback of, I think, 16 feet, right?
Good point.
I think we're good with that.
Yep. So for example, if they were to build a 30 by 40 garage without the shed, their lot coverage would be 15.6%.
So did you hear all that? If you get rid of that shed, you can build a garage for
A 30 by 40.
30 by 40, which
which would be under the 16%.
which is right around 16%. We'd allow that.
I'll make that
Okay.
motion.
Make that motion.
Yes.
I don't know how we rewrite this to say that. But
So you would be able to write, so instead of the 3.6 meters, we'll change that to, one moment.
well, the shed's gotta go
So
too.
3.6 would then go to 4.8 meters for A.
It's 3.6 for what? Yeah, setback of 3.6 meters,
It would be 4.8.
4.8 meters. Yeah. Okay,
And then I'll
how
figure
many feet's that? Or
16.
doesn't matter.
16.
15? Okay,
4.8 is 16 feet.
Yep. And then a lot coverage, I believe the committee agreed on 16% instead of the
16%.
25.4.
Yep.
16%.
Correct.
Then the owner's got the choice of whether they keep the shed or get rid of the shed, and they don't need to come back to the committee. It's up to them in the building department to work that out.
Mr. Bishop?
And then we would ensure that there was a condition that we had that they would complete the application that they've already made for the closure of the 66-foot shore road allowance and the acquisition of it.
So I'll read out the conditions. So the conditions that it only applies to the garage shown on the site plan. The tree preservation bylaw applies. Prior to the pouring of footings, the applicant must supply confirmation from an OLS that the garage complies with the rear lot line. And then prior to the issuance of a building permit, the shore road application must be completed.
So give me the setback is 4.8 meters?
4.8 meters is 16 feet.
Okay. Be it resolved, the committee's decision with respect to file D13 MV 2019-005 be recorded as follows. A variance provision of section 5.2 to permit an accessory building, brackets garage, to have a rear lot line setback of 4.8 meters or 15 feet, as opposed to
16.
permitted setback of 7.5 meters or 24.6 feet is granted.
It's 16 feet, not 15 feet when you convert the meters.
16 feet?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. And an increase to provision of section 5.2 to permit a lot in the waterfront residential type 4L WR 4L zone to have a maximum lot coverage of 16% as opposed to required maximum of 15% is granted. And an increased provision 5.2 to permit a lot in the waterfront residential type 4L WR 4L zone to have a maximum shoreline coverage of 16% as opposed to required maximum of 15%. In agreement? Carried. There we are. Need a mover and a seconder to adjourn the meeting. Moved by Jerry Walker. Seconded by John Smith.
Need a seconder for adjournment.
Declare this meeting now adjourned at 2:10 PM.
Don, it's 1.
110.
110.
1:10.
Feels like 210.
Well, cancel the lunch. We're out of here.
Good
Thanks very
afternoon,
much for your
everyone.
attendance. Have a great day.
You.